American-Vietnam War, spanning from 1954 to 1975, pitted the Socialist Democratic Republic of Vietnam, also known as the DRV, in the north, and their allies against the Republic of Vietnam in the south and their U.S. allies. The war ended with the DRV taking control of all of Vietnam and implementing a communist government. In the aftermath, soldiers of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or ARVN, fled when they could to the U.S. and other countries. Some remained in Vietnam under the communist government they had previously fought against. Because these veterans were neither a part of the winning DRV military or of the U.S. Armed Forces, they do not receive veteran status in Vietnam or in the United States and are thus not eligible for service-related government benefits. In contrast, people who fought for the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north, or the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, won the war and enjoy awards and benefits from their government in Vietnam for their military service. In the United States, veterans of the American-Vietnam War were often looked down on by the general public, but were still recognized by the U.S. government and received veteran benefits despite public opinion. Our research is focused on the treatment of war trauma for these four veteran groups: ARVN veterans in the United States, ARVN veterans in Vietnam, former DRV military and NLF in Vietnam, and U.S. veterans in the United States. Our research explores what types of mental health services are available to these veterans, how accessible the care is, and whether veterans utilize these services. We chose to focus on mental health treatment for these veteran groups because the mental health needs of these veterans have not been adequately met or researched, particularly in the Vietnamese context. We hope to use what we have learned to identify the gaps and inequities in mental health care for these veterans.
While conducting this research, we came across a number of barriers that affected the accessibility of mental health treatment and support and affected veterans' utilization of the mental health and support services available. We divided these into two categories: cultural and structural barriers.
In Vietnamese culture, mental health is heavily stigmatized and misunderstood, and mental illness is often considered to be a sign of weakness or punishment. Additionally, people who exhibit abnormal behaviors due to mental illness are seen as crazy, not ill.
Because growing up in that era, mental illness is partly considered and strongly considered as a weakness. And so for us, if your mind is weak, that's why you can't manage it. And especially for a Vietnamese man, the societal role of being a provider, being someone, the protector, the one who leads and governs, and for them to be labeled as weak-minded is a big shame. And then the other aspect, the cultural, the religious aspect of it is part of the stigma also stems from the misconception of the taboo that mental illness is a consequence. It's a consequence of the bad things that you or your family or your ancestors have done in the past life. And then lastly, in the Vietnamese community, oftentimes when the term mental illness is referred to, they all accumulate to one diagnosis. Oftentimes they look at that as schizophrenia, or they use the term crazy. And so it doesn't matter what it is, if it's the term mental illness or psychology is product, they only think of the term crazy.
Chưa kể là cái hồi trước đó là người điên người ta sẽ hay lựa chọn là cho họ vào trại tâm thần, gọi trại tâm thần hoặc là trại chứ không phải gọi bệnh viện, hoặc là nhốt trong nhà không cho ai biết, xấu mặt gia đình, cho nên họ sẽ bị coi là gánh nặng. Vậy nên ai mà bị chẩn đoán là có rối loạn tâm thần hồi đó là coi như đáng tử rồi, coi như họ sống không bằng chết ấy. Đó là cái nhìn của ngày xưa. Còn bây giờ mình khác nhiều rồi, mình bắt đầu có những cái kiến thức nhiều hơn và đúng đắn hơn về rối loạn tâm thần ấy. Nhưng mà người ngày xưa họ không có thoát khỏi được những gì họ đã được dạy đâu.
This stigmatization and lack of knowledge about mental illness is largely due to cultural differences between Vietnamese society and psychology, which is based on Western ideals and cannot be effectively adapted to other cultures. Psychology terms accepted in the West do not exist in the Vietnamese language, and their societal views on health and mental illness prevent Western diagnoses from being accurate.
Psychology only works if you stay and work in the US, in the Western world. Psychology is useless outside of that. Because, and this is coming from a white man.
Just trauma languages and theories that we use that are very biomedical model, Western biomedical models, that how it really fails to capture the complexity of the experience that, like Asian American communities or other minoritized community experience, right? Like, what do veterans say about mental health, right? Like, do they call them mental health, or do they just say, I don't know, headache or bad memories? Like,
ARVN veterans in Vietnam are discriminated against by the Vietnamese government and general public. They are often thought to have fought for the wrong side of the war and are judged for their past loyalties. This discrimination can affect veterans' everyday life and can prevent them from accessing government resources and other support systems.
Những người trong chiến tranh sau này hòa bình, người ta có cái ác cảm với bên này. Ví dụ một anh thương thương binh bây giờ mà người lạ đến hỏi chuyện thì anh không mấy đâu. Ngoại trừ là những mạnh thường quân. Bố chú tại ở là cái vùng ven. Con hiểu cái vùng ven này là cái vùng xa thành phố. Sợ nói ra những cái gì rồi ở đó người ta bắt bẻ, người ta đổ này kia, người ta căm ghét này kia.
Quýnh cùng cái cây đòn gánh nước á, đập nước đỡ két nè. Cái em tôi ra chặn đường chạy xuống ngay quỹ ban công an ngã bụng đậu chơi trong hốt công an đứng tùm lum, đâu có nói gì đâu, nên tôi chạy vô tập quýnh được rồi nó quýnh lên cây két cái đầu, máu đầu quá rồi mấy kia bỏ không nói không có bắt.
Anh trở về trên đôi nạng gỗ, anh trở về bại tướng cụt chân, em ngại ngùng dạo phố mùa xuân bên người yêu tật nguyền chai đá.
In the US, stigmatization also exists among the American veteran population. However, much of this stigmatization may have more to do with military culture than American culture.
So, I mean, veterans in the military were trained to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and we're basically taught to suck it up and drive on. So we come home saying we're okay even when we're injured. We don't ask for help even though when it's really bad. We literally have to fall apart into an unfunctional mess before we reach out for help. Just talked to one the other day. Big, strong special forces veteran, guys, is about as deadly as they come, and he's in tears because he's having a hard time. They just did the new Agent Orange PACT Act, and he's filing for compensation. He's been due for 40 years, but asking for help and asking for money for his injury is not something he's used to. So he's having a really hard time, and a lot of veterans, that's actually where they're driven to suicide, is when they go for the disability pension.
In addition, U.S. veterans of the American-Vietnam War often distrust the U.S. government, which can prevent them from seeking help from the government-run Veterans Association, or VA.
Well, you know, the VA is open in available. So the main barrier is their own, distrust of the government. People who were drafted and then sent over there and then came home and called names because they, answered the call, or they had. That's kind of their own heads getting over the fear of the government.
This matches with a poll conducted in 1985 by the Washington Post and NBC, which found that 57% of the veterans surveyed were more distrustful of the government because of the American Vietnam War, and that, quote, cynicism was even higher for veterans who saw heavy combat, end quote.
Give me an F! Give me a U! Give me a C! Give me a K! What's that spell? 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 Well, come on, all of you big strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam.
For ARVN veterans, a significant barrier to receiving care is the lack of recognition as veterans by both the Vietnamese and U.S. governments. This means that ARVN veterans do not receive benefits from their governments for their military service and cannot access the VA in the U.S. or the Vietnamese Veterans Association, or VVA, in Vietnam. They are still able to access other government aid, like Medicare in the U.S., which has helped some ARVN veterans ease the financial burden but does not compensate them for their military service.
There's a lot with the Vietnamese seniors, and most of them are war veterans. And it pains me to see what they're going through and suffering, and they get no help. And so before the Affordable Care Act passed, a lot of those individuals have no insurance.
In the United States, ARVN veterans face another challenge: a lack of mental health information, materials, resources, and professionals available in the Vietnamese language.
That a lot of mental health services, or even ideas and access to facilities and services, those are not often spoken or communicated in the native language of these Asian immigrants, especially first gens.
So the infrastructure is also not there to help support, because when I was in Chicago, I was the only Vietnamese speaking clinician in the whole state.
In Vietnam, there's little support and funding given to mental health and mental health research. This lack of funding and resources can make mental health treatment difficult to access and can lead to poorer quality of care. The lack of governmental support and resources likely perpetuates stigmas about mental illness in Vietnam.
Về dịch vụ chăm sóc sức khỏe tinh thần cho cựu chiến binh ở Việt Nam, theo như những cái kinh nghiệm mà chị đã trải qua ở 175 thì nó chưa có được phát triển lắm đâu. Dịch vụ chăm sóc sức khỏe tinh thần cho lão khoa nó cũng đang gặp tình trạng tương tự, chứ chưa nói tới một cái bộ phận đặc biệt như là cựu chiến binh.
And while psychiatric hospitals exist in Vietnam, they have a history of harsh conditions and abuse of their patients, causing people to be wary of professional and inpatient treatment.
Ngày xưa thì nó cũng giống nhau hết. Các cái buồng giống như các cái salim ấy, thì khi mà thầy về khóa thì cái phòng của thầy cái tường 40 phân thôi chứ không phải là tường 20 đâu. Và cái cánh cửa thì rất là chắc chắn, và có những cái ô nhỏ như thế này này để đưa thuốc, đưa các thứ qua cái ô đấy. Bệnh nhân ở trong kia nó bức bối, nó la hét, nó đập phá. 70 sáu mấy đấy thì là giáo sư Lê Hải Chi đi học ở Đức về, thì ông mang cái mô hình cửa mở, open doors.
American veterans also face structural barriers in accessing mental health care. Long wait times for treatment and claim processing at the VA can deter veterans from seeking help. A study conducted by Feynman, Asfaw, and Griffith regarding wait times for U.S. military veterans found that the average wait time for a mental health appointment was 44 days through a VA community partner and 34 days through the VA. These wait times are in addition to the time it takes for the VA to process a veteran's claim, which the VA reported to be 118.3 days on average in March of 2023. This means that the average U.S. veteran is waiting 5 months to receive care.
Just try to listen to our plea. We just want to see our people free.
With all of these barriers, how do these veterans access the support and care they need? While conducting our interviews, a common theme emerged. All 4 veteran groups utilized the ties they had to the people around them and to their fellow veterans. According to those we interviewed, this social connectedness is vital to their mental well-being. In Vietnam, many of the veterans we talked with cited family and friends as their primary mode of support. One ARVN veteran, Ha Long, stated it is only because of his wife he could overcome his struggles, and another veteran has shared their feelings about those closest to him.
Cái đối mặt với nó tức là cái đầu tiên là cái tình cảm trong gia đình, biết chia sẻ, biết chăm sóc và biết cái lúc nào đó cần phải nhẹ nhàng, đừng đẩy cái đó bị ức chế.
For former DRV military and NLF veterans, the VVA in Vietnam provides a way to connect with other veterans and find social support.
Cái hoạt động thứ hai nữa để động viên nhau là tổ chức cho các cựu chiến binh đi tham quan lại chiến trường xưa. Và cứ mỗi lần đi như vậy thì gợi lại cho họ những cảm xúc. Cảm xúc đó có những cảm xúc buồn, cũng có cảm xúc vui. Nhưng mà cái điều quan trọng động lại họ là tri ân những người đã ngã xuống và nhắc nhở họ phải sống xứng đáng với những người đã ngã xuống.
ARVN veterans in Vietnam are not able to participate in the VVA. However, they still rely on veteran connections with each other, but some of these connections come from ARVN veterans living overseas. They may also receive financial support from ARVN veterans and family living overseas, or from US-based organizations dedicated to supporting ARVN veterans in Vietnam.
Cái anh ở bên Mỹ á, tên là Đào Vĩnh Ký, là anh liên hệ bển mỗi năm cũng gửi tiền cho cô đó.
For ARVN veterans in the United States, especially those living in areas with a large Vietnamese population, participating in and getting support from their surrounding community is central to the veterans' well-being. Additionally, ARVN veterans in these areas are able to maintain connections with fellow ARVN veterans. Among the veterans, word-of-mouth referrals can be a powerful tool to encourage seeking mental health treatment.
They become their own champion for the community, and they start recommending it to other friends. Hey, I've seen Paul, he was really helpful. This is what I was before, now this is where I am today. Right? I want you to be able to get better as well. Just go talk to Paul.
ARVN veterans in the United States also utilize religion as a form of social connectedness and support. Churches can be a safe space for them to connect with their fellow countrymen, and church leaders can provide support and guidance to struggling veterans.
You know, it's where, Vietnamese people, immigrants can come to their Catholic churches and eat their food and talk to one another in Vietnam. They don't have to worry about their English or accent. It gives them a space where they can at least be who they are.
U.S. veterans also heavily rely on their fellow veterans, not only for support, but also as a referral system for mental health treatment and other helpful services.
And it's in those informal settings that they get to hear other veterans who aren't selling anything say, I found a lot of relief from this therapy at the VA, or this person is good, or this program is good.
Social connectedness is not the only support system these veterans depend on. Our interviewees told us about the importance of having a hobby or participating in their communities and creating meaning in their lives.
A lot of these veterans were able to stay busy with work and never had to think about it. And now that they're done working, all of a sudden, because that stuff you carry doesn't go anywhere. A lot of them can't wait to go down to the river and start fishing after they retire, and they get down there and it's just the war. And they realize they've just been distracted by being home. So giving them hands-on things to do. Gardening with veterans is a big one that helps. Guitars for veterans, just all that stuff.
18 năm nay là cứ tiết kiệm được bao nhiêu lại dành cho những chuyến đi để tìm bạn bè, tìm nắm xương của đồng đội. Cái món ăn tinh thần đó tức là cái cần thiết cho những người thân, cho những bậc cha mẹ, vợ con, các cháu, các gia đình mất mát. Cái đó bác cần nhiều hơn.
Nói bác ấy làm vậy thì sáng đến sinh viên thì vui. Bác có nói với các bạn sinh viên rằng là mỗi ngày tôi chọn một niềm vui, chọn bông hoa, chọn một nụ cười. Hay tôi chọn nụ cười để đến các bạn sinh viên này, lúc nào cũng cười tươi này cái nọ thứ giờ. Thì bác thì lại nó không sốc mà tâm lý.
The American-Vietnam War had a lasting impact on the mental health of those who fought in the conflict, even if they are not recognized by their governments. Our research highlights the numerous cultural and structural barriers that prevent these veterans from accessing quality mental health care and support. However, despite these barriers, the theme of social connectedness emerged as a vital aspect of these veterans' lives, allowing them to experience a sense of community and belonging that is essential to their well-being. By identifying these barriers and highlighting the importance of social connectedness, we hope to bring awareness to the gaps and inequities in mental health care for these veterans and work towards providing them with the support, resources, and care they deserve.
Sad and lonely, often will the bosom swell at remembrance of the story how our noble hero fell, how he